Thank you for all your interactions yesterday, not just with the 10 plus players going and bringing in £170 million, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I've just whacked my keyboard. Also, the attack, and also just the keyboard that's attacked me, the killer bumblebee, the giant killer bumblebee. I'm joking, it wasn't. It was quite giant. It wasn't a killer. It didn't attack me either. Maybe not the size of a golf ball, but I think it was the size of a small Brussels sprout. Let's put it that way. Anyway, thanks for everybody joining in and your concern. So £170 million is what I said yesterday. If you didn't watch the video, I went through. It wasn't the players that were necessarily would leave and we get no money for. There's players that are out of contract and whatnot. It was really the players that we could generate some funds for. And I had a look through. I apportioned the value to each player, and I thought if we did okay at conservative estimates, 170 million. The reason I did conservative estimates was because it is pointless me overvaluing everybody. I want to get a realistic figure of what we can get in. But what was a few people had mentioned, said, well, Gonzo, you've really underdone your valuation on Mohammed Kudus. And perhaps I have. So I said £70 million. And I gave my reasoning for saying £70 million. But I understand other people's reasoning for thinking it should be a lot more. It's not just me that thinks it should be a lot more. Or you, should I say. It's a club. The valuation is, let's get this right, £80 million if he's sold to Europe. This is his buyout clause that's activated in the next window. £85 million if he's sold to another Premier League club. £120 million if he's sold to the Saudis. So obviously their valuation is higher than the 70 million. I just think his form has dipped to such an extent. It's nosedived this season. And as I mentioned, any valuation that Kudus has is surely based on last season and his time at Ajax rather than this season. But it did lead me to thinking, well, this is something that Graham Potter is in control of here, to a degree. I think he's played overly defensive, overly pragmatic football. And I've discussed it so many times. I'm not going to go into discussing why he's done it again, but he needed to sort out defence. He's done it. It requires no more conversation than that. But to continue playing that way, I'm not really seeing the benefits this season of West Ham doing it. We're safe. We're not going down, right? I don't think the defensive football gets us enough points that we climb the table. So it's not like you can say if he does a really good job doing that, then we'll finish 3 places higher in the Premier League and get an extra £8 million or whatever the case would be. It doesn't look like the defensive football yields that particularly. So I actually started to think about it. Well, what is actually going to give some benefit? Well, it's the attacking football, and in particular with a player like Mohammed Kudus. Because I really like the shape that we finished the game with against Bournemouth. At the risk of repeating myself, I like Jared Bowen in his favoured position, whatever that might be, right wing, right side of a front three, whatever it is. But it's basically Jared Bowen with a covering player behind him. I really liked it. I thought it always worked well with Soufal. I think it certainly will work well with Aaron Wan-Bissaka. And it puts our best player, our top goal scorer, and our captain in his best position. Immediately you have a little bit of balance there. I like Lucas Paqueta basically being played where he can do damage, and obviously really like Nicholas Füllkrug. But there was something quite interesting between the balance of the team, and it was with Kudus out there on that left-hand side. And I don't think Kudus looked particularly good on the left-hand side, just generally. Certainly probably played into some of his frustrations that he had under Hulan Lopetegui because he wasn't deployed well out there. But if you're going to play with a striker like Füllkrug, I think it can work. Now, he got an assist. Ironically, he got an assist not from assisting Füllkrug for a header, but for Jared Bowen for a header. He got down the wing, he put in a cross. It wasn't much, but it was so much more effective than anything he'd done earlier on in the game. And if we're going to start to get anywhere near teams coming in, and this doesn't really need to be a bidding war because there's a buyout clause. You pay the clause and you get that. But what I'm saying is, if there's a lot of teams interested in Kudus come the end of the season, then people are less inclined to bid under the buyout clause, right? So the maximum we can hope for is 120 million. I don't think we're going to get it. I think if we're being realists, we get the 85 million from a Premier League club, maybe. And ironically, he was linked with Liverpool on numerous occasions, but in the last few days, it's been Jared Bowen that's been linked with Liverpool. But he's got another chance against Liverpool to showcase Kudus and showcase his skills, particularly in a weak position. Curtis Jones has been playing right back. The whole Trent Alexander-Arnold situation has become as much of a soap opera as it has a football story. But when you put that to one side, he's not available, he's not playing now. Conor Bradley came, what did he play, last 6 minutes, I think, against Fulham. Obviously, Liverpool lost against Fulham at the weekend. Aside from that, Curtis Jones played there. Curtis Jones played there in the game before as well. I mean, he's a good player, Jones. He is a good player, but he's not a right back, is he? When they're on the front foot, I think it can look quite good. I mean, this is really where our intent, and in particular Graham Potter's intent, becomes really, really important. Because if we can play on the front foot, if we can go in with the sort of level of intent that maybe even Fulham did, and Fulham didn't have as many shots as Liverpool, you wouldn't expect it. And we're playing at Anfield, that was at Craven Cottage. They didn't have as much possession as Liverpool. Again, you wouldn't expect it. But can you attack them? Can you cause them bother? Well, I think you can. I remember watching I say remember, it's not like I've got to delve back into the memory banks too far. But watching Betos play in the Merseyside derby against Van Dijk, I thought he caused him all manner of problems. All manner of problems. I really do. So Van Dijk's a wonderful player, but he can be unsettled. That's my point. I think Fulkrug can cause that back line a few problems if we're also doing it at fullback as well. Basically, do I think Curtis Jones is good enough at defending right back to deal with Mohammed Kudus? No, I don't think so. And I think if you have got that totem pole of a striker in the middle in terms of Fulkrug, I just think it brings a completely different dynamic to the attack. I liked it. There was an indicator which suggested, I know I've mentioned it before, but it suggested that the team had balance the way we reverted to the shape, the 4-2-3-1 or whatever it might have been against Bournemouth. And that is because even when Kudus left the pitch, there was still exactly the same threat. It was just in Guilherme, which demonstrated that actually the shape was right. Now I understand horses for courses, and maybe that shape is not right for Liverpool, but I do hope he doesn't revert back to the three at the back. And I think all he's trying to do, really, Graham Potter, is feather his nest for next season. He's either going to have a situation where people are and ahhing and probably not going to be too keen to go and pay that buyout clause for Mohammed Kudus as it is now, or in the remaining games this season, he can turn Mohammed Kudus into a menace. All of them, Jarrod Bowen, Nicholas Fulkrug, they can all be a menace. But he's got to get them playing on the front foot. And I think if he does that, and we suddenly get Mohammed Kudus back on the goal trail again, and assisting, and looking dangerous, I mean, he's remained one of the top dribblers in Europe, but nothing sort of summarised Kudus like that situation. I think it was in the first half where he was on the right-hand side and he did a dribble and then he absolutely shanked his cross. What we're missing is obviously the knockout blow. We're missing the assist. We're missing the goal. If we can get that from him, then I do think we create a load of interest. I am certain he's going, by the way. I'm speaking, and someone may say, oh, you're speaking as if he's definitely off. Yeah, I think he's definitely off. I can never say 100%. I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not his agent. I don't work for the club or anything like that, right? But 90% I think Kudus is going. Because when I did my little list yesterday in yesterday's video that accounted for 170 million, and yes, if we sell well, we can probably boost that to 200 million. But if you take that 70 million out, then it starts to look a little bit weak. It doesn't take much for that to collapse. If maybe we don't sell Kudus and we don't sell Edson Alvarez, then we've got a problem. Because we're not going to generate enough to bring in the players that we want to bring in. Now, if we're clever and we can work our free transfers in a smart way, then I think I'm quite confident of getting Kyle Walker-Peters. So there are free transfers there to be done, and who knows what's going to happen with Jonathan David and Angel Gomez. At the moment, one is looking slightly better than the other, but none are looking brilliant. But the longer it goes on, the more of a chance we stand. But we're still going to miss out. To really do what we want to do is going to take big money. And so I think Kudus is going. And I just think it's probably really up to Graham Potter to decide how much of an increment Kudus's value is going to go up, basically. And I just look at it now, I think there's no more benefit anymore. There's just no more benefit to playing sort of defensive football. And he must have liked it, right? Potter must have liked the questions he got after this game more than the other games. He must have liked it when the London Stadium kicked into gear, basically. It's a big old ground. It's a big building. There's nothing quite like silence in a big venue, is there? One person talking in a big hall, or whatever the case may be. And my point is, when it's quiet in there, it's very obvious that it's quiet. It seems more pronounced than a small venue being quiet, a small ground. He must have liked it. He must have liked it when West Ham went on the attack and the crowd are up for it, and suddenly the crowd starts making a noise, and all of a sudden the venue becomes noisy. He must have liked that. He must have enjoyed that. That must be tapping into something. You've surely got to enjoy a press conference where people are talking about your strikers and talking about your goals and talking about that sort of thing, whilst working in an environment that's noisy and seems to be upbeat. That's got to be better, isn't it, than, I don't know, deploying quite... Look, let's be fair. The tactics have been boring. Apart from the first game against Aston Villa, and then what I perceive to be, whatever, the last 40 minutes or whatever it might have been at the weekend against Bournemouth, it's been boring. So, and he said, that's how I want to play. Well, let's prove it. Let's do it between now and the end of the season. I wonder if he realises quite how much more fans will be invested in what he's doing, how much more we'll look forward to the transfer window, how much more money we'll get for the players we're trying to sell. But probably more importantly, how much more players that are looking at West Ham, considering whether to join, will think, oh, hold on, that's a viable option. Now, I'm not sure about Jonathan David, as I've already articulated. It's not whether or not we'll get him over the line, but just I'm not sure where he fits in for Potter. But let's go with it for a second and say that Potter wants him, when we're going to get him, and what's going to happen in that final say-so is going to come down to whether or not the player wants to play for West Ham. I'd imagine it's a far easier sell to show him the last 40 minutes against Bournemouth and say that's how we're going to play, than it is to show him the other games. I think you show him that, then all of a sudden you've got players, particularly attackers, who will look at that and think, there you go, that's the team I want to play for.